years, and I'm going to start the year off with something a little bit different. A top 5 list. When someone finds out that I'm into anime, usually the first thing they ask is, what's your favorite? And this is a pretty difficult question for me because I have seen a lot of anime. So picking just one favorite is almost impossible. And so I have compiled here a list of my top 5 all-time favorite anime. Presented in alphabetical order because no one of these is more favorite than the others, and what I would most like to watch completely depends on what mood I'm in at the time. Here we go!
Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champions. Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champions. Change into digital champions too.
Digimon is one of my all-time favorite animes ever. I guess Digimon is just really nostalgic for me because it was one of my first really huge fan obsessions. All of the seasons have things about them that I love, and I would be really hard-pressed to pick a favorite. If I had to, I guess I'd have to say Adventure just for pure nostalgia, but 02 has my favorite character ever, and that is the Digimon Emperor. The Digimon Emperor was my first ever anime crush, and I still absolutely love him. He is the most awesomest villain I've yet seen, although Avengers Loki comes pretty close. Tamers is probably best for storytelling and is where Digimon got a lot darker and more sci-fi. Frontier I'm not the biggest fan of, but Sabers I absolutely adored. The first bit of Cross Wars was pretty fun, and although I wasn't the hugest fan of Cross Wars 2, it did have the most fangasmically awesome scene in the entire franchise. I love Digimon and will continue to watch any and all continuations of that franchise. It makes me feel all fangirly inside. Let's face it, Fullmetal Alchemist is pretty much on everybody's anime favorites list. It's the one title on my list that practically everyone knows and always reacts with a knowing nod. Ah, yes, of course FMA. The reason FMA is so incredibly well loved by all is that it just is absolutely phenomenal in every conceivable way. The writing is incredibly good and is able to run the entire gambit of emotional responses. A single episode can have you crying from laughter one moment to crying from soul-crushing drama the next. Its ability to touch your deepest emotions combined with some incredibly kick-ass action scenes, and you've got one of the greatest fantasy epics ever animated. And I really think I'll leave it at that because this show has been talked and discussed to death, and for good reason. Fullmetal Alchemist is incredible, but I'm sure you already knew that. Territory. This is my favorite anime if I'm looking for something a little bit more artsy. Based on the classic novel by Alexander Dumas, Gankutsuo, the Count of Monte Cristo is one of the most interesting animes I have ever seen. Aside from the obviously intriguing visuals, which I don't think I've ever seen done before or since, this show has some incredible depth. It's a sci-fi reimagining of the novel, and it features the Count as the antagonist instead of the protagonist, and it's an emotionally intense ride with an amazing climax at the end and some of the most incredible character development. Add to that its very heavy message revolving around the nature of revenge and hatred, and you've got an all-around incredibly great show. I cannot possibly recommend this enough, and it didn't get nearly the popularity that it deserves. A truly amazing anime.
始まりの風よ届けメッセージいつでもあなたを信じているから As a female anime fan, it's pretty much assumed
assumed that I like me some girly bishonen anime boys. And yes, I like me a good reverse harem show as much as the next girl. But generally speaking, these sorts of shows are just empty nonsense and guilty pleasures. Junk food, if you will. But there is one pretty boy show that is actually incredibly well written and well put together enough that it completely blew me away and deserves a spot on my list. Story of Saiunkoku is set in a fantasy world based on ancient China and revolves around a girl who has aspirations to go into politics but can't because she's a woman and they aren't allowed in the political arenas. She becomes the emperor's consort and forges ahead with her goals, becoming the first female official. The story concerns the hardships of aspiring to create change, especially as a woman, Shurei's growing relationship with the emperor and other members of the court, the intrigues of imperial politics, and her commitment to better herself and her country. It's a political drama with a heavy dose of pretty men, a refreshingly sweet and innocent, yet very strong-willed leading lady, and very, very gorgeous artwork. Watches an awful lot of different types of anime, my favorites list is pretty darn diverse. This last show completely blew me away for being so well put together and so well executed. When They Cry is a horror anime about insanity. Although there is a lot of ruthless and gory violence in it, what makes it truly terrifying is its atmosphere and tone. It centers around a group of children who live in a tiny little town that is haunted by a dark and terrifying secret. That's pretty standard horror fare, but this story reboots itself constantly, and each time it does, we watch a different character's strange descent into violent madness, all leading up to a climactic massacre, and then it restarts again. The town is caught in a time loop centering around a certain character. And while the first season plays out like a horror show, the second season is really more of a mystery action show as the characters become cognizant of what's going on and endeavor to try to find a way to stop it. It's a brilliantly thought through series based on the visual novel game of the same name. It's one of the most famous horror anime right now, and for very good reasons. And that about wraps it up for my favorite anime list. I highly recommend each and every title on this list. They are all spectacular. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week for another top 5 list. Bye!